Thank you very much, Lesroy. Today is the last of the regular COVID-19 briefings, and I am extremely pleased with where we are now as a nation in this 2-year fight against the deadly virus. We as a team, we have been coming here almost every week since March 2020 to report to you on the COVID-19 pandemic. All of the briefings were just for about an hour. There were many long hours of meetings and preparations that preceded us coming here, in addition to our regular daily work that did not go away because of COVID. This was the period when we as a people faced the greatest threat of our lifetime and the greatest threat in our nation's history, the COVID-19 pandemic. But we were indeed happy to have answered the call to service. I remember earlier on in the pandemic, about 2 years ago, when we were first called to cabinet to discuss the way forward. We sat around the huge table at government headquarters with all the ministers in a room that was filled with great uncertainty about the future we faced with this deadly virus, but united in a common cause to keep our people safe. This was before vaccines and before the knowledge of the effectiveness of non-pharmaceuticals, and getting infected was literally a death sentence. It was a time when some who could leave were leaving. Countries were beginning to close their borders, and we as a tiny independent nation were left to fend for ourselves. We made a very important decision then to turn a huge tourist ship back in an effort to reduce the risk of exposure in our life-first approach. To some, it was a controversial decision, but it proved over time to be the right one. Over the next 2 years, we made many more tough decisions in our successful management of this pandemic, bringing us worldwide recognition. The decisions were not always popular, but were decisions that steered us to a path of bringing wave after wave of infection under control with minimal hospitalizations and death. I believe our success in the fight was due to the fact that we in health and at the task force level were given the latitude to make decisions based on scientific evidence and facts as they unfolded, and our decisions were devoid of any political interference. We kept science at the core of every decision we made and stayed focused and did not get distracted. We told you very early of our simple four-pronged approach to the management of the pandemic with the assessment of our progress at every stage. This was, 1, to keep the virus at bay for as long as possible with very stringent screening protocols at our port of entry. We were successful at this, being one of the last places on the face of the earth to have its first imported case on March the 24th, 2020. 2, that once the virus arrived, our aim was to limit hospitalizations and death with our aggressive ring fencing contact tracing exercise, where we casted a wide web to identify all possibly infected persons and protect the most vulnerable among us. We were again successful at achieving this, as we were one of the few nations to have had 0 deaths and no major hospitalizations as a result of COVID-19 disease 16 months into the pandemic, until we entered our second wave on May 19, 2021. Our success at managing this pandemic then caused us to be recognized internationally as the country with the lowest rate of confirmed cases and having the lowest risk of COVID-19 in this hemisphere. 3, it was to limit the time between the development of community spread and the arrival of a vaccine, while at the same time keeping everyone safe with the prescription of non-pharmaceuticals. We were again successful in achieving this, having started our vaccine rollout on February the 22nd, 2021, while we were still COVID-free. The 4th and final leg was to vaccinate a significant proportion of the population to get us to an immunity threshold so that we could effectively fight off the continued and relentless attack of the virus and open back our country safely and get back to some sense of normalcy. Today, we have one of the highest vaccination population coverage in the region without a government-imposed mandate, with 82.9% of adults with at least one shot and 77.8% of adults fully vaccinated. We are continually asked by our Caribbean colleagues how we were able to have such a successful vaccine rollout program while others struggled. The answer we give is encapsulated in one word: confidence. Our people had confidence in the message that was being delivered through our education program about the vaccines and their safety and efficacy. Our people had confidence in the health services offering the vaccines, which is why they turned up in their large numbers at our health centers throughout St. Kitts and Nevis to be vaccinated. Our people had confidence in the policymakers deciding on the rollout, starting with our Prime Minister, the two health ministers who helped manage this pandemic, our Chief Medical Officer, and every member of the health team. I want to put on record my commendation for our Prime Minister for the astute leadership he provided during this crisis, a leadership style that brought out the best in all of us for the benefit of all. We called for an all-of-society approach in this fight, and you responded. We were able to unite the country to defeat this invisible foe for which we had no blueprint of past experience to guide us. It was because we as a people remained united in our efforts why we were successful. And I do believe that as we begin to emerge from the stranglehold that COVID-19 has had on our everyday life, that it is our combined efforts that will take us into a successful post-pandemic era for the benefit of all. Because of our united efforts, we have gotten through the worst part of this, or the worst period of this pandemic, relatively unscathed, compared to many nations, great and small, far and near, with only 43 deaths, many of which were preventable. Today, we have 0 patients hospitalized in St. Kitts and Nevis, and the COVID wards have been closed for about 5 weeks. We have 0 active cases in St. Kitts and Nevis, and we have one of the highest adult vaccination coverage in the region without a government-imposed mandate. We have come a long way over the last 2 years from border closures, lockdowns, curfews, and significant restrictions on our daily activities to a near normalcy now. Our children are all back to full in-class learning. We are now having mass events, and every sector of our society has reopened. We are beginning to open our doors to the rest of the world with significant reduction in the stringent entry protocols, with a move to the rapid antigen tests for entry on the 1st of April. We now have a sufficient population immunity through vaccination and infection to absorb more risk and move forward boldly but safely. I must hasten to add that 0 laboratory-confirmed COVID cases does not mean 0 COVID. The virus did not suddenly disappear because the situation report tile showed 0 in the active case section. Also, with the relaxation of entry restrictions, the virus will continue to enter our ports once it remains a threat globally. The virus is still out there and still presents a significant threat to the vulnerable. We just lost another elderly person to COVID-19 on Monday this week. Let us remain vigilant and not get complacent. As we move forward, we all need to take more personal responsibility in this fight, as your singular action can affect all of us. I urge you to continue the use of the non-pharmaceuticals to protect yourself, and more importantly, get vaccinated and boosted if you are eligible to do so. Data continue to show the importance of vaccination and booster doses to protect individuals, both from infection and severe outcomes from COVID-19. During the recent Omicron surge, those who were boosted were 21 times less likely to die from COVID-19 compared to those who were unvaccinated, and 7 times less likely to be hospitalized. The importance of getting vaccinated continues to be crucially important in this fight. Finally, it was an honor for me to have served with the dedicated team of the NEOC led by Dr. Hazel Laws, and the team from the task force and the NEOC led by Mr. Abdias Samuels. But more importantly, it was my honor and pleasure to have served you, the people of the Federation, coming here week after week for the last 2 years to update you and answer your questions. And although you will no longer be seeing us here on a regular basis, we will continue to fight behind the scenes to keep you safe until this pandemic is fully in the rearview mirror. I thank you.